joining me now is France 24's Environment Editor, Valerie de Kemp. Valerie, first of all, does this ruling mean that the Environmental Protection Agency can't curb emissions at all?
Well, the ruling doesn't completely eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency, the authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. But what it has done is limit its ability to do so, seriously limit its ability to do so. So the EPA can still use small measures to regulate greenhouse gas emissions in individual power plants. But its scope of action has been limited to put in place the kind of sweeping rules that the country needs in order to transform the energy sector and respond to the urgency of climate change. And this case was brought by several Republican-led states. And essentially, in its decision, the Supreme Court sided with West Virginia, a major coal mining state, arguing that only Congress had the authority to transform and reshape the American economy by limiting pollution. And there's no doubt that this is one of the most significant environmental rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court ever. And what's very unusual about this case is that it was based upon the Clean Power Plan. And that was a plan unveiled by Obama in order to limit pollution from coal-fired power plants. That plan never actually went into effect. It's regulation that does not exist. The Supreme Court blocked it in 2016. So essentially now they went against a regulation that does not exist. And that is something very alarming, according to environmentalists, because they are wondering what will the court do next in the next climate change case. And even one of the justices, Elena Kagan, who went against the Supreme Court decision, she noted that, saying the Supreme Court essentially, they could not wait to limit federal efforts to actually combat climate change.
And of course, the big question is, does this mean that there's a serious risk that the US will not be able to now meet its climate targets?
Well, there will be real repercussions from this decision. There's no doubt. There's a high chance that Biden won't be able to meet his targets to limit greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That is the first deadline set under the Paris Agreement. As a reminder, the U.S. vowed to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half in the next decade and then become carbon neutral by 2050. The White House and Congress, they have some tools in order to meet that target. But now with that Supreme Court decision, it's becoming increasingly difficult, mathematically speaking, to get there. So there's a spending bill in Congress at the moment, Biden's reconciliation bill, that includes tax credits for renewable energy for electric cars. If it goes through, that would mean that Biden would get 1/3 to half the way towards meeting that target, but it's been stalled for more than a year now. And I think it's also important to note, what does it mean if the U.S., the second largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in the world, if the U.S. does not meet its targets, then it means that the world probably will not be able to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the objective set under the Paris Agreement. And you also need to think about, what does it mean for the rest of the world, for countries that are not on track to meet their targets, that are resisting change, and they are not doing what needs to be done? Well, if the U.S., again, the second largest emitter in the world, does not respect the Paris Agreement, well, what it means is that it loses all credibility. And so there's a real risk a real risk that can happen.
Valerie de Kemp, thank you.